This week, the White House says the U.S. needs more renovation loans, and they're going to make it happen. We'll break down the current state of the government-backed 203K renovation loan, and here to help me kick it around is Matt Pocaro, AKA the 203kway. Wait until you hear his story. All up next on the newly rehabbed Renovation Rundown. I'm Sean Thompson. I'm the nation's leading expert on mortgages featuring renovation financing. And this is the Renovation Rundown. Hey Matt, we're live. Good to see you, man.
Always good to see you, my friend.
Wow,
A lot of big news, a lot of things to talk about lately.
A lot. And you know what's interesting, and I want to go back a little bit and pick this up because I find it super interesting, your story and kind of how you and I met, and the fact that you're, and I don't think it's a bad thing by saying it this way, you're not actually like a mortgage loan officer, makes the story like super cool, right? So, I see your background, the 203kway, and you and I really met like right before COVID when you first got started, but I'm not going to steal any thunder. Maybe tell everybody who you are and like what you do and why you and I are even talking.
Absolutely. So I've told this story many times and I try to condense it over and over again, but it still ends up being longer than it probably should be. But so I'm going to try to give you the quick and dirty version. So my name is Matt Pocaro, and I founded something called the 203kway, which really was a community dedicated to helping people really internalize and benefit from the FHA 203k loan from the buyer's side. Growing up, I grew up in a blue collar family, and but always wanted to set myself up to really be in a position where, financial independence was a thing, right? Growing up with a blue collar family, so a lot of ups and downs financially, and so from a very young age, money was important to me, and just trying to find ways to set myself up so I didn't have to see that volatility. So very soon after getting into the W-2 corporate world in the construction side, in the engineering side, I wanted to know how I could supplement that. So I got very interested in real estate investing, learning so much about how real estate is the creator of the most millionaires and everything like that. And, in the very beginning, being a young kid, especially living here in New York, where everything is so insanely expensive, the idea of owning a house or investing in real estate, let alone owning one house, seemed completely out of reach, right? So fast forward a bit, I really did try to get into the game, and I was like, okay, well, there's people out there doing it, right? They're doing it with, little money out of pocket, and they're finding there's all these kinds of different strategies to get into real estate and get into real estate investing and stuff. And to be honest, I tried a lot of them, failed at a lot of them.
And to be clear, when you say to get into the game is what is affectionately called today house hacking, right?
Yes. So that's what I learned. And basically what happened was, up until that point, my understanding was that in order to buy a house, you need to put 20% down, you needed all the money, you needed, renovation money. If we were looking at flipping houses, my background was in construction. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe we could flip houses, but like, all right, we still need the money, and nobody was willing to just give me their money to flip houses with. Right. So I did, I was frustrated and went down a lot of different rabbit holes. Luckily, I went to our local real estate investment association that met not far from where I lived, and started going there and started learning a little bit more about like, okay, maybe there's something I could do here in New York. Maybe there's some investors there, some people that have mentored me, and tell me what they would do in my position. And the lady that runs it is this lady named Melissa Shea. She is, a heck of a human, has 8 kids, runs the RIA, has thousands of properties, just an all-star. And so I did, start mentoring with her, and took her off to the side one day. I was like, listen, Melissa, if you could do this all over again, you're very successful. I would love to know what you would do if you're in my position. I said, listen, I have a couple grand in the bank. I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? I don't have I don't have the resources. I'm a young kid. I'm like, what would you do if you could do this again? If you could start off, should I be a real estate agent? Should I be a wholesaler? What should I do? And she said, if I've never done it personally, but if I can go back and do it again, I would use something called a 203K loan to buy my first house here in New York and Long Island. Basements are very popular. So she said, live in the basement, make the basement an apartment for yourself, rent out the upstairs. And I'm like, okay, but well, how am I fixing this up? And she's like, no, the 203K loan is an FHA loan. It requires you to only put 3.5% down of the total purchase price. Plus they give you the renovation budget to do all the renovations on the house. You don't have to come out of pocket in the house. So for a guy that's been looking into this game for years and years and years, reading books, going to seminars, watching videos, this was the first time I had ever heard of the 203K, and all of those different, conversations I had or experiences I had. So it stuck with me. And I was like, okay, well, this sounds awesome. I'm like, only 3.5%. Even I could probably muster that up. Right. And my market was about 10, 15 grand. And I had just about that in the bank. So lo and behold, I went and started researching it. And there really wasn't much info about it out there. Again, it was very, from the lender side, maybe just kind of like very not really benefit oriented advice, but just like things about like, okay, it's this debt to income ratio. It requires this, it requires that. But I guess didn't really understand the benefit. But the benefit I learned from Melissa was if I had not owned a house yet, right? If I use this loan, look at it through the eyes of an investor, buy a good deal, house hack it, which I learned, what house hacking was, live in one portion of the property, rent out the other portion of the property, live in that, build equity into the property, force it through the renovation, could take that money, repeat the process, and keep building the dream. So I thought of it like that. And then I saw the true power of it. And that's what set me on my journey to figure out this thing and make it the way that started my journey, which it did, which is exactly what it did.
Now there's more to your story that I want to get to, but just let's digest what you just said there. I'm doing this 25 years, renovation lending. I'm about 10,000 transactions in, and I've trained about 5,000, 6,000 loan officers, realtors, and contractors on this business. The story that you just relayed is not uncommon yet woefully a secret, right? So there's still a large, and we're going to look at some numbers on that because I brought some data to share with you, considering your perspective on this, but to continue on with your story, there's like a really cool sun and the moon and the stars lining up for you in a way that A, you're in an expensive part of the country, B, you're in an expensive part of the country where multifamily housing is not all too uncommon, right? They're kind of everywhere, right? New York, the tri-state area is like the home of the 3 and 4 family when you think about it, right?
Yep.
We have a lot of them, and that's really kind of the niche that you found. I mean, expensive housing that you could, as I like to say, find being sold at a discount because of its condition and get the money to renovate and then get the other renters that you take on to basically pay for everything was a really super good combination for you to take it a step further. You didn't just do this for yourself, right? What else happened after that?
No, so the beauty of it all is, like you said, I combined a lot of different strategies and was able to reap all the benefits of real estate investing from one loan, right? The other huge caveat, which I honestly didn't learn from Melissa, but I basically learned on accident during my property search was, because let's be honest, right? Finding a good deal is still hard. It was hard back, 5-6 years ago when I did this. It's hard now. It always will be hard. And I was placing lots of offers and getting shut down left and right. And
especially if you're a primary buyer competing with investors. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. So, 203K acts as cash. You can buy the same benefits cash buyers have. The only difference is that this is financing. So it does go through an approval period and stuff like that. But, at the end of the day, I still got beat out a lot by even back then. And back then foreclosures were a little more prominent. So, foreclosures weren't a slam dunk. They weren't a walk in a park by any means. Dealing with banks, REOs, bank owned properties, dealing with those banks was impossible. They were the worst sellers to deal with in many cases. But what happened was, I learned about this, I learned about the multifamily thing by accident, because as I was making offers, I looked at one property and I was like, man, this looks really good. It's a 2-family property, but I won't be able to afford it. I was only approved for maybe 280,000 at the time, which in New York buys you nothing. So I was really scraping the bottom of the barrel. And this, so I knew that maybe I could buy it, but I would never have the money to renovate it. And my lender thankfully told me, he said, oh, well, no, this is an FHA loan. So you can forecast the future rental income of the other unit to your debt to income ratio. And that's going to allow you to get approved for more. And it just so happened that it gave me just enough money to fit in that renovation budget. It gave me that, it boosted me just enough to add the renovation. It was the numbers were 270,000. I picked up the property for. It was an $80,000 full gut rehab. It was literally a crack house. It was like nobody wanted to touch this thing. It was really, a lot of people said it was a knockdown. But we did it. We fully renovated it using the bank's money. And that multifamily thing was great because, I lived there I lived there briefly, but I knew it wasn't going to be my forever home, but I knew it was my starter. And lived in one unit, rented out the other, basically covered a very small amount of the mortgage that had to come out of pocket every month. I was maybe kicking in $300-400. And then very shortly after, I moved out and lived with my wife. And I still hold that property, and it's a rental property for me. But, all in, my loan was $350,000. I only put $9,500 down because I actually got a full 6% seller's concession at the closing table. So I actually got money back at closing. So I netted only $9,500 down, which technically was under 3.5% when all was said and done. It was more like 2.7%. So when I reappraised it after the renovation was done, I built 130,000 of equity into it. It was worth 480 when I was done. And then I rented out that other unit for $2,000 a month, cash flow net. So that was my all in. I still have the property, but really most importantly, what it did was, number one, gave me the confidence to go do another one, to go get into the real estate game. That's number one. It gave me the skill sets. I always say the 203K loan is almost like a, flipping house with training wheels on, right? I like to tell people all the time, I love when people tell me, oh, the 203K is too much paperwork. I'm like, compared to what? Right? Too much paperwork. I grew up in the construction business. I know how construction is supposed to be run. The reason people have so many issues with their contractors is because they treat it like a hobby and they don't treat it like a business. That paperwork's there to protect you. It's not there to make your life miserable. You need a clear scope of work. You need to make sure your contractors have the right licensing and have trade lines and stuff like that. Because when they don't have those things, when you don't have clear scope of work, you don't have the right contractors, that's when things blow up in your face.
Well, the paperwork, the heavy paperwork and difficulty misnomer really comes from, and they don't take it the wrong way when I say this. It comes from loan officers and realtors who put a barrier in front of using the 203K because they don't know how to do it, right?
Bingo.
So
it's an easy, convenient excuse.
Oh, you don't want to do one of those loans. They're tough. I hear they're going to take a long time, and it's a lot of paperwork. And the customer goes, oh, well, I guess I'll stick with the mint lime green kitchen. You're right.
Yeah, it's a shame, but that's why we do what we do. And, at the end of the day, despite all of that, and listen, this all happened before I knew people like you, before I knew people like Garrett, before I knew people in this industry, right? I was lucky enough to meet a lot of people in the renovation loan industry as time went on and realized that there is a right way to do things. But I'll be honest with you, my first go at this was a freaking pretty damn near close to a nightmare. I mean, for a lot of different reasons. Not necessarily anyone's fault, but just because, like anything else, the first time you do something, it is a challenge, right? But
oh, yeah, listen, you stuck with it. My first one was a nightmare back. Well, I'm not going to say how long ago, but certainly long ago. But you stuck with it. Well, here's what I'm impressed with, right? Particularly with your story is you got a huge following now. You got a lot of people that because of how you've represented yourself in social media. Kudos to you on that. And that it was an organic story and your body sings when you talk about it, right? People find you authentically helpful, and they want to call you and go, "Hey, teach me how to do that," right? You know, and I'm not talking about a small number of people, right? You got a pretty huge following, you know, chasing you to learn how to do this. That's super impressive to me.
Because you know what, man, like people are sick and tired of being told, are being gaslighted into thinking, you know, people know what's right for them. And the shameful thing is that, you know, people go to these people that are quote unquote professionals and are supposed to give them the answers they're looking for, right? In terms of like, hey, you know, I did hear about this thing, like these renovation loans out there, and you know, we don't have too much money, but you know, it would be nice if we could do something like this. And then people that really should be the ones that help them through this process are the ones steering them away, or they're giving them wrong information.
You totally nailed it. Right now, I'll tell you this right now, and you know, it's no shame on my industry, but you can be a customer and go to your loan officer that you're working with and go, "Hey, I heard of like a 203K or a renovation loan," and they're going to go, you don't want to do that.
90% of them.
I don't even know what you're talking about, right?
And you know what, Sean? The big thing about that, man, is that, and the point I'm trying to make, and I think why maybe this following has grown so much, is that a lot of people like me in that situation, I was told very similar things, right? But I knew deep down that like I'm the type of person where like a little work doesn't scare me, right? Like I have pig-headed determination, and that is the one thing I can say. Like I'll find every wrong way to do something, and I am the worst. I'm not smart by any means. I'm just very determined, and I don't quit. But I take a lot longer on things than most people do. It takes me a long time to figure stuff out, longer than it should. But I will keep sticking with it. And the whole point is like, I knew I wanted to figure out a way to do it. And really, a bulk of people that come to me were like, they're people that were shot down by their real estate agent, their lender, their brother's friend, but they still know deep down, they're like, man, this thing sounds like, I know everyone says it's like a pain in the ass or whatever, but like, this could really be a game changer for me. This could really, if this works, this could really be exactly what I need.
Well, look, something doesn't jive if you're a first-time home buyer and you're seeing and hearing about all these investors buying and fixing and flipping. You see it on every channel, you know, on cable, you know, the fix and flip shows, and something's not ringing when you talk to a professional and they go, we got nothing for you for that, right? And you're like, yeah, but how are all these other people doing it? You know, and you hacked your way into it, you know, and you stuck with it. And the truth of the matter of what you just said is most people will buy a house maybe 2 or 3 times in their life if they're lucky.
Yep.
So they don't want to mess that up, right? Which is why they seek out advice and they take advice seriously. So if you send them down the wrong path, it's quite easy. They just don't want to mess it up, right? You know, so
most people's biggest investment they ever make in their life, right?
So let's go into a couple of other things, because I'm dying to talk to you about, you know, your perspective on a couple of things that maybe happened this week.
Yeah.
And maybe some of the trending, you know, on renovation lending in general. I kind of feel like it should be a whole lot more popular than it is. All right. Or than it is. So
well, we're seeing a little bit of I mean, I know I am, but I'm sure you are too, but I am definitely seeing a significant shift in the overall feelings on these programs, with kind of the economic environment right now. I've rattled this stat off a couple times, and maybe you've heard me rattle it off, but I just want to restate it. A very interesting stat came up. It's somewhere, I think it's a little bit below 80, but we'll call it around 80% of the existing United States housing inventory, right? The existing housing that is in the country right now, just under 80% of it is 30 years or older. Okay. So the housing market is aging. It needs to be repaired. And when you look at the trend historically of home building over the last 30, 40 years, you'll see that the amount of homes being built every decade have gone lower and lower and lower over the last couple decades. And what's the most alarming is in the last decade, it has dropped off sharply. It is dropped off almost completely, almost to less than half of the rate that it was previously.
Well, look at where you live. You live in a part of the country where there's very little space left to build new houses. all there is. I mean, New York, New Jersey, that area. So even and in the tri-state area, to build on that statistic, it's about 58 years is the average. Yeah, like listen, I live in a historic part of the border of the Delaware, New Jersey, PA border, and I got a house from my block that was built in 1760s.
Oh wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So I get old, man. I get it. So can you see my screen?
Yep, I can.
Cool. So I wanted to go through a couple of things with you on this, and one was the announcement made Monday from the White House, right? So the White House says on Monday that they're going to take certain actions or try and aim or push or guide certain actions, to help with home ownership. They recognize rates are going out of control, price in general for properties going out of control. What can we do to help home ownership? As I like to talk about, there's about double the amount of need for the amount of inventory the country has at the moment, right?
Yep.
So one of the things that surprised me was they started talking about the 203K. So the White House brought up the 203K, which I was like super excited about that, right? Because I'm like, okay, so that's going to help with driving some awareness of reno, and or purchase and renovating kind of your experience, right? But I want to tell the truth here, and I want to be honest about where things went. Now, what's on the screen now is HUD counts 203Ks, how many they're done by every lender, by every originator in the country, right? And their fiscal year is September through September. So it just ended, right? Yep. So we got a 12-month look at how many 203Ks were done in the entire industry. Yep. And I circled that number here for you, right? And that number there is the 4,034 number. All right, so 4,034 203Ks were done, all lenders in the entire country, September to September 2023. Right? What do you think of that number? That's a tiny number.
It's very small. Yeah. And I remember talking to a couple of guys in the industry about this and kind of being like, okay, because I looked at it historically, I went back and I noticed a lot of the stuff was falling off.
And that's the next slide here. So
yeah, well, there you go.
Right?
Yep.
So you're looking at, back in 2010, that was 22,000. Even that was small, right? Yep. Relative to the amount. So let me put it in perspective even further, right? The industry in 2022 did about 8.8 million units, all types of mortgages, all mortgage lenders throughout the country, right? And if you just look at the 203K volume, that's
wow.
0.0005% of it was 203K. Now let's be honest. 203K isn't the only vehicle that lenders use for renovation.
That's the key point, right?
But let's say that the industry is really about 65% conventional and 35% K. But I'll give the benefit of the doubt and say that there's 80% other types of business. That's still only 0.0022% of that 8.8 million units. Now, you and I both know, let's say I asked you how many people bought homes last year that either needed repair, they needed to be repaired, or they were repairs that the customer was likely going to make, put down 3% and then go to Home Depot and spend 40% on a 29% credit card, or they need us to consider the after improved value because the house is so beat up, right? I'll get 5% thrown at me, 6%, 10%, 20% of the market. Let's go with a conservative 1, 2, and 3%. If you think it's as high as 3%, it's 264,000 units compared to the 20,000 we're doing today. That's the delta that you and I are talking about.
Right. Yeah. I asked this on my Facebook a couple of weeks ago and you chimed in. You were one of the first people to respond. And I asked, to my realtor friends, of your home buyers that were buying in, however recently, what percentage of them plan on doing work on their house? And a lot of people said all of them. So when you're saying here, now listen, there's obviously there's a lot to that. But, when you're saying something like only 3% of those 8.8 million mortgages needed work done on their house. We know it's more than that. But even just to go to show you, right, again, the amount of missing market share here because of the fact that there's not enough, there's not enough awareness of what's out there and that this thing is. But I think, Sean, to your point, the White House talking about this, okay, the market conditions of what we're seeing, the aging housing stock, the tremendous decrease in home building. If you want to afford and buy a house and hold on to what's left of the American dream, you need to be renovating your house. You need to be buying that's the only way people are going to, number one, be able to afford things. And number two, that's the only way they're going to be able to, keep inhabiting the existing housing stock. Look, right. You look at places like Europe. Remember, I tell people all the time, like the United States is a very young country, right? Comparatively to the rest of the world. So you have places in Europe. I remember, being in Europe and having some friends over there, and, their favorite thing to do is, we're in London and they point to a church and they're like, that thing's 500 years older than the United States as a country. And that church is still standing. How's it still standing? Were those Englishmen really great builders? Would they have really good wood over there? No, they've been renovating this stuff over time.
And if you've been there, you see that they've retrofitted all of those old structures with things that we take for granted nowadays, like air conditioning, and plumbing. Most of the plumbing in London's on the outside of the house because they didn't have it when they built it.
Yes. So these are things that we're going to have to adapt to, right?
Well, there's a couple of really good solves renovation lending has. It's the inventory thing. It's the fact that customization. I mean, the Joint Center for Housing Studies puts us at $580 billion in home improvement for 2023. That's the high watermark. We've never been that high before, right? So there's a lot of customization going on. People always customize the home that they buy, even if they buy new homes. And because it's expensive,
100%.
Renovation lending or 203Ks is the most affordable way to get that big project and that big piece of customization included into your mortgage by a long, it's the most affordable way to finance that by a long shot.
Especially with the higher mortgage rates right now, right? When you look at something like that, that's an 8%, it's better than a 10% home equity line of credit or 28% credit card, interest rate. Right?
Hey, the combination of purchasing a home, being sold at a discount because of its condition, and getting the money to renovate it rolled into your 30-year fixed mortgage could be the difference between a 4% mortgage and an 8% mortgage in monthly payment. And that's what makes people move nowadays. That's what moves the country, monthly payments, right? So hey, listen, we could probably blab about this for hours, right? And I'm pretty sure.
Well, weeks.
Yeah, I know, right? And I'm really happy that you and I got to connect and will continue to do so on an ongoing basis, right? I know you got a pretty big audience and you're doing wonders for them. Thank you. Thank you. And
my pleasure, man.
Whatever help we can be or I can be is one of these older guys who've been around for a while doing this. Just let me know. And anything else you want to leave us with?
No, I think what you said about you being an older guy and me kind of being in this game, here's the good news, right? And here's what I want to tell people. There's going to be a lot with all the changes we're seeing happening, right? I know I've been seeing it, for a while. Like you said, the zeitgeist of the times with lenders and real estate agents was just like, oh, 203K loans are too much of a pain. Renovation loans are a pain. You don't want to do those. That verbiage is shifting. That I'm not seeing that as much. I am now seeing, the lenders that are trying to get business, muster up business, the real estate agents mustering up business. They're realizing that they do need to respect these niche products and these products that are going to ultimately help their buyer. So they're jumping into these right now, and they're going to try to now learn from the starting line. What I want to tell people is you're going to see a lot more lenders jumping into it again. You're going to see a lot more real estate agents jumping into it again. And I tell people you get one of two options when you go and just go out looking for a lender cold to do a 203K. You're going to get either lender number one that's going to tell you, avoid it, you don't want to do it, it's too much of a pain in the ass, and they're going to steer you in another direction. The second, well, you're really going to get three. The second version and most common thing is you're going to get the person that, with right now, they're not doing refis anymore. There's a lot of, they're going to take any business they can get. So you're going to get number two lender that they're going to be like, yeah, we can do it, because they want your business. They're going to bring it on, and they're really not going to understand the process, and they're figuring it out just as much as you're figuring it out. And that could drive you nuts. So that's the second thing. That's what happened on my first one. Okay. It was a lender that wanted it because they wanted the business, but they really didn't understand, and they didn't have the back office for it. Those are the two options. The third option is look around for the guys out there, the guys and the gals and the people that have been in this game before it became the trendy new thing, before it became the hot new item, and they know this thing. You need to work with people that have been doing this for a while, right? And that's what it comes down to. And that's going to be the focus for people getting into this game. Is they're going to have a lot of people trying to learn it, but just know that there's people out there like yourself, like myself, people we know in the game, obviously, that have been doing these for a very, very long time. So look for those people, seek out those people, because they're the ones that are going to keep you ahead of the curve.
Well, there you have it. Matt Pocaro, the 203K way. I love your story. Tell people where to find you.
Absolutely. My Instagram is where it all started. So Instagram, the 203K way, just look me up on there. And then, all the other socials, it's the same thing. YouTube, I've been posting more content on YouTube. I also have a Facebook group, Facebook community dedicated to 203Ks and helping people out with renovation loans, house hacking and stuff. Again, you just look up the 203K way in all those areas, you'll find it.
Well, it's been great watching you grow, watching your audience grow. And like I said from the beginning, the oddest thing is you're not a mortgage loan officer, but it's also the greatest thing about you. So thanks for spending some time with me, Matt, and we'll catch you soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks, guys.